Hold. Rain ticked off the rifle in Ruiz's hands as SSG Elijah Brooks cut the plaza in half with that single word. The mist hung low, swallowing sound and marble alike. Boots struck stone, clockwork, deliberate, and my breath rode the hush that always follows a command. If you're new here, subscribe now to honor the silent. We tell these stories so their echo never dies. I watched the young sentinel, SPC Daniel Ruiz, freeze mid-pace, 6 feet of coiled duty, chin tucked, eyes front. His glove creaked against the stock, thumb rubbing an invisible groove he'd made during training nights when no one saw. The drizzle threaded his cover, ran down to the brim, and dropped steady onto white stone. A whisper of flag cloth answered from the mast like a ghost saying, "Proceed." Brooks took one measured step, then another, gaze angled not at the crowd sheltered under wet umbrellas, not at the camera crew loitering for a human moment, but down, where the marble lip met the step. Something there, small, out of place. MSG Karen Holt stood at the edge of the line, eyes narrowed, the silver bracelet at her wrist dull with rain. Behind her, CPT Ryan Mercer hovered with the lens, restless, hungry, fingers riding the shutter like a habit he couldn't break. Brooks didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. "Ruiz, your line." "Aye, Sergeant." The word landed flat, disciplined. The plaza smelled of wet wool and stone dust, that cold mineral that gets into your teeth. Ruiz took a sliding half step, boot heel kissing the seam. His rifle gleamed, even as the drizzle smeared the shine. Hours of polish don't surrender so easily. On the ground, tucked just beneath the marble overhang, a folded envelope sat like a trapped bird, yellowed edges, a line of ancient blue ink where rain had not yet seeped. Holt glanced to Brooks. "Protocol?" Brooks's eyes never left the line. "Logged and archived." Mercer edged closer. "Mind if we get that on film, Sergeant? Found objects resonate." Brooks pivoted just enough for Mercer to meet the look that keeps a line sacred. "Mind." Rain tapped the rifle butt. Somewhere down the hill, the wind shook a stand of trees. The sound lifted and fell like distant surf. Ruiz crouched with that impossible economy the tomb teaches. No wasted motion, no sound that isn't supposed to be there. His glove brushed the envelope. The paper was soft, nearly skin. He eased it free. For one heartbeat it stuck, then slid into his palm, cold as the stone. "Straight to Holt," Brooks said. Ruiz stood. The crowd murmured, umbrellas shifting, a throat cleared, a child hushed. The envelope was heavier than it looked. He turned it just enough to see a corner of lettering. The raindrops pooled and lifted, making a printed blur. He blinked, and a name surfaced before the water erased it. "To my son." He stopped breathing, long enough to hear his own pulse, long enough to hear the whisper of the flag again. "There are words you are not ready to meet. Not in uniform, not in the open, not in front of eyes that do not understand the price of silence." Holt stepped closer. "Soldier!" Ruiz's thumb pressed the seam. He did not open it. His hands knew the boundary, even as his heart pushed against it. He held it out. Holt reached, silver bracelet sliding against her wrist, and Mercer shifted, lens climbing, red tally light blinking like a small, impatient eye. "Not for broadcast," Brooks said. Mercer's smile was quick and thin. "Understood." The rain grew steadier, each drop a tiny drum. Brooks resumed his pace, perfect 8 count, the click a metronome cutting the morning into equal parts respect. The plaza's silence deepened, thick as wool. The envelope drank the weather, grew darker, softer. Ruiz stared at it as though it had said his name. He imagined the hand that wrote it, inked between breaths, pressed against a rucksack, folded on a knee in a place where the air was hot and the ground smelled of metal. Duty is a straight line. Heart is not. "Proceed," Brooks ordered. Ruiz pivoted back to his mark, but the envelope had started to sag, rain threatening the ink into oblivion. As he moved to pass behind Holt, a gust chased along the rope line and lifted one edge. The paper fluttered. The corner bent back. For an instant, no longer, the inside flashed, and he caught the first sentence clean. "If I don't make it home, tell my boy I stood my watch." He felt the line like a blade. His chest tightened, his thumb found the rifle's groove. He shifted the envelope from palm to palm, as if by changing hands he could lessen its gravity. Holt saw the shake, not much, just enough, and adjusted her stance to shield the object from the weather. Brooks's reflection ran along the marble beside the letters, his face and the tomb sharing a single fixed gaze. The image held like a photograph the world shouldn't own. Mercer's camera crept again. "Just a cutaway," he murmured, as if respect could be issued in edits later. "Sir." Holt didn't look at him. It was enough. The crowd's murmurs settled back into reverent quiet. Somewhere, the low thud of a door closing carried across the grounds. The air smelled faintly of earth opening to drink. Ruiz drew a breath that tasted like new pennies and rainwater. He moved, not forward, not back, but inward. A choice doesn't echo, it lands. He folded the envelope with 2 fingers, the way you might set a flag to rest. Then, with the barest break in precision, he slipped it under the edge of his tunic, against the wool over his ribs, where warmth and duty would keep it from dissolving into nothing. Holt's eyes, sharp as a rangefinder, found his. A question without a word. Brooks's cadence kept time. The flag whispered something older than any of them. Mercer lifted the camera to reframe the tomb, disappointment twitching across his face. The drizzle softened to a mist that made the world look like a memory. Boots struck stone. The line held. "I tell you this in the hush between footfalls. The unknowns do not ask for spectacle. They ask for fidelity, for a watch kept without flinch. And yet a letter in the rain can pull a man off the straightest line, not to break it, no, but to honor it with a human cost that doesn't fit in any manual." "End of shift in 2, Holt said quietly. "Roger." Ruiz's voice was gravel and vow. Brooks halted on the mark, turned, and for the briefest sliver of a second, his eyes cut to Ruiz's tunic as if he could feel the weight hidden there. Then, a single sound out of place. The soft click of Mercer's red light turning on, and the lens instead of the tomb fixed squarely on Ruiz's chest. The shutter snapped. The barracks were silent except for the hum of the fluorescent light that never stopped buzzing, like a gnat circling a wound. Rain still whispered on the roof, steady and thin. Arlington was asleep. The tomb never slept. "Couldn't let it drown," Ruiz whispered. He sat on the edge of his bunk, uniform stripped to undershirt, the soaked gloves hanging over the heater. The envelope lay in his lap, warped from rain, sealed but trembling like it still breathed. Across the room, SSG Elijah Brooks's boots were lined at perfect angle, one of those small disciplines that kept madness at bay. Ruiz turned the letter over again. The ink bled faintly where water had kissed it. If I don't make it home, he should have handed it in. He knew that. But rules never carried the smell of paper written by a dying hand. He thumbed the edge, once, twice, then slid a nail under the flap. It gave with a sigh. Inside was a folded sheet, yellow-gray with age, edges frayed like old fatigues. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was uneven, thick with emotion, written in black pen that had survived decades of silence. "To my son, I don't know your name yet. I don't know if I'll live long enough to see you. But I want you to know I stood my watch. The world may forget the names of men like us, but promise me you'll remember what honor looks like. It's quiet. It's lonely. But it's worth it." Ruiz's jaw clenched, his eyes blurred, until the letters smeared like fog over marble. He rubbed his sleeve across his face, but the wet kept coming. The room smelled of metal polish and damp wool, the same scent that lingered on his gloves. Outside, thunder rumbled like distant artillery. He read on. "If this letter ever finds you, don't cry for me. Just live your life like the unknowns, without needing to be seen." Ruiz folded the paper slowly, fingers trembling. His breath shook. He'd stood 21 steps for months without error, but that letter made him falter without moving an inch. He closed his eyes. Behind them, the rain turned to gunfire. His deployment years replayed in flashes, the faces he never wrote back to, the name of a friend etched on a bracelet he never wore outside the uniform. And then, the door opened. "Still awake?" Brooks's voice. Ruiz snapped upright. The paper vanished behind his back instinctively. "Yes, Sergeant." Brooks stepped inside, the faint scent of rain following him. His uniform jacket hung on his arm. His t-shirt clung to his chest from humidity. His precision didn't fade even off the line. He glanced once at Ruiz, then at the small yellowed envelope on the bed. "Where's the letter?" Brooks asked quietly. Ruiz's breath stalled. I'll log it in the morning, Sergeant. You were supposed to log it the moment we secured the plaza. Brooks's tone didn't rise. It didn't have to. His calm cut deeper than any shout. Ruiz looked down. I needed to know what it said. Brooks studied him for a long moment. And? It's from a soldier, Ruiz said. Vietnam, maybe, to his kid. He never made it home. That's not ours to read. I know, Ruiz's voice cracked, but it feels like it is. Brooks took a step closer. His shadow crossed Ruiz's bunk, sharp and dark. Son, at the tomb, you don't feel. You guard, you march, you remember. That's how you honor them. Ruiz met his eyes. But what if remembering means knowing who they were? The question hung there, too heavy, too human. Brooks's face didn't shift, but his eyes flickered for the briefest heartbeat. A memory passed, a funeral, a folded flag, a name he'd never said aloud. Then, Holt's voice came from the doorway. We've got a problem. Both men turned. She stepped in, her presence carrying command like a blade. The silver bracelet at her wrist clinked softly when she crossed her arms. Sir, she said to Brooks, Public Affairs is asking about an artifact found during rotation. Someone leaked footage. Brooks's shoulders tensed. Footage? Holt nodded. A still image, the letter in Ruiz's hand, posted online an hour ago. It's spreading. Mercer. Brooks exhaled through his nose, quiet, controlled fury. Lock down all documentation. I'll deal with him in the morning. Ruiz swallowed. His hands felt suddenly bare. Sergeant, that's my fault. Negative, Brooks said, firm. You didn't post it. But I didn't stop it. Brooks turned on him. You think you could have stopped a camera you didn't see? That's not your failure. That's his. Holt looked between them. Command wants the letter turned in immediately. PAO's pushing for a statement. They think the public deserves to know what was written. Ruiz stared down at the folded page in his palm. The words "Don't cry for me" stared back like an order from the grave. The public doesn't deserve this, Brooks said. They deserve silence. Holt didn't answer. The rain outside deepened, a steady percussion over the roof. Ruiz stood slowly. The paper trembled in his hand. He looked at Brooks, then at Holt. What if it's not just any soldier's letter? What if it belongs to one of the unknowns? Holt blinked. Ruiz? I'm serious. What if that's why it was left there? What if it's meant to be read but not by them? By us? Brooks's expression hardened. Stop, he said at once, soft but final. Ruiz froze mid-breath. Brooks reached out. Hand it over. Ruiz hesitated. The silence stretched until the hum of the fluorescent light was deafening. His fingers wouldn't open. The weight of the letter pressed against his skin like a heartbeat that wasn't his. Then, knock. The door cracked open again. Mercer leaned in, phone in hand, face lit by the glow of the screen. His smile was too light for the hour. Evening, gentlemen, he said. Looks like you've gone viral. Brooks's eyes went cold steel. Get out. Mercer's smirk widened. Too late, Sergeant. The world's already watching. He turned the phone so they could see. The image on the screen, Ruiz holding the soaked envelope against his chest, had over 2 million views. The light buzzed louder. Brooks didn't move. Holt's bracelet gleamed once in the flicker. Ruiz looked down at his own hands, trembling around that piece of history, that whisper from the dead. He could still hear the words, "If I don't make it home. Tell my boy I stood my watch." And for the first time in his service, Ruiz wasn't sure which oath he'd just broken. The next morning broke with a sunlight too bright for the weight it carried. Arlington shimmered beneath a hard blue sky, flags snapping like drumbeats. Crowds pressed closer to the rope line than usual. News cameras, tourists, veterans in faded ball caps. The world had arrived, uninvited. Eyes front, Brooks murmured. The Sentinel's line moved in silence, boots striking stone with a rhythm older than any headline. Every motion was flawless, every breath controlled. But beneath the marble calm, Ruiz's chest burned. He felt them, hundreds of eyes, lenses glittering like rifle scopes. His pulse matched their clicks. Somewhere behind the crowd stood CPT Ryan Mercer, arms crossed, phone in hand, smirking like the man who'd found the headline of his career. MSG Holt kept her stance near the steps, face unreadable. She'd spent the dawn fighting calls from public affairs, from command, from people who said this is good for morale. They didn't understand that the tomb didn't do morale. It did silence. It did honor. But not spectacle. "Sergeant," Holt whispered as Brooks stepped near her mark. "They're asking for permission to read the letter at 1100 hours, live broadcast." Brooks didn't look at her. His eyes traced the rifle's barrel in reflection, his face steady. "Denied. They say it's not up to us." "Everything here," Brooks said, "is up to us." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of cut grass and distant gun oil from the ceremonial battery. The crowd hushed as the sentinel pivoted. 21 steps, turn, 21, back. Precision slicing the noise in half. Then Mercer's voice cut through it. "Sergeant Brooks!" The crowd turned. Cameras followed. Brooks halted mid-step, rifle locked in perfect carry. Mercer walked forward, flanked by 2 assistants with boom mics. "The public wants transparency," he said, loud enough for every phone to hear. "They want to know what message was left for the unknown soldier. They want to feel something." "You don't manufacture feeling," Brooks said. His tone was calm, dangerous calm. "You stand here long enough, you earn it." Mercer smiled for the cameras. "The Army could use a little humanity for once." "The Army buries humanity so the rest of you can sleep," Brooks replied. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Ruiz's hand tightened on the rifle grip. The air thickened with tension. A cardinal landed on the fence behind the crowd, chirped once, and even that sound seemed too alive. Holt moved to intercept. "Captain Mercer, step back to the perimeter, sir." Mercer raised a hand, half apology, half theatrical. "Relax, Sergeant Major. No one's crossing the line." But his crew had already pushed closer, their cameras catching the shine of the tomb, the faces of the guards, the hush of marble and flag. Each frame turned reverence into content. Ruiz's voice came low, restrained. "Permission to speak, Sergeant?" Brooks didn't look away from Mercer. "Denied." Ruiz clenched his jaw. "Sir, that letter wasn't meant for them." "I said denied." Brooks's tone cut like a rifle crack. The echo rolled across the plaza. The crowd flinched. Even Mercer blinked, startled by the authority embedded in a single word. But then, from the corner of his eye, Brooks saw it. The letter. The same fragile envelope, now laminated, resting in a clear case on a portable podium near the media tent. Someone from PAO had retrieved it overnight. Above it, a small sign. "Artifact found during guard rotation, to be read 1100 hours." Brooks exhaled through his nose, slow, steady, fury contained. "They turned it into a prop." Holt's jaw tightened. "They said it'll connect civilians to the fallen." Ruiz stepped out of formation without realizing. A half step, enough to break the sacred geometry of the line. Brooks's head turned, sharp. "Return to post." Ruiz froze, shame flashing across his face. The crowd murmured, phones rising. Mercer's voice came again, smooth, rehearsed. "Maybe you'd prefer if I read it, Sergeant. For them." He gestured to the crowd, and they responded, a soft cheer mixed with curiosity. The sound felt wrong here, like laughter in a chapel. Brooks's teeth ground together. His hand hovered near the rifle sling. "You'll do no such thing," Holt said, stepping between them. Mercer shrugged. "Orders. From above, Sergeant Major. You can't stop a public broadcast." Brooks's gaze lifted to the flag. Wind pulled it taut, the stripes snapping like thunder. He turned slowly to Ruiz, whose eyes were fixed on the case across the plaza. The young guard's lips moved in a whisper no one could hear. "Don't cry for me. Just live your life like the unknowns." That line, it haunted him now, louder than any applause. Brooks took a breath. "Ruiz." "Sergeant. At 0950, I want you off this plaza." "Sir, I can still—" "That's an order." Ruiz hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." Holt glanced between them. "What are you planning?" Brooks's eyes stayed on the letter. "If they're going to read it, it'll be the last thing they film." By mid-morning, the plaza was full. Veterans with flags, children on shoulders, reporters in rain jackets despite the clear sky. A stage had been set just beyond the rope. Mercer adjusted his tie. He looked like a man ready for a promotion, not a reckoning. The crowd hushed as he stepped to the microphone. "Today," Mercer began, A letter from the past reminds us that courage never dies. Found right here at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Brooks's voice cut across the microphone feed. Captain Mercer, he said, low but carrying, this ground doesn't belong to you. Every camera turned. The broadcast froze mid-frame. Brooks stepped forward, measured, unstoppable, until his shadow stretched over the podium. Step away, he ordered. Mercer's face twitched. Sergeant, the nation has a right. Brooks leaned in. The nation already has this right. It's buried beneath your feet. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Even the air held its breath. The flag snapped once like a command from heaven. Then, from the sideline, a low mechanical whir. A drone. It hovered, lens fixed on the tomb, feeding live footage to millions. Brooks looked up, eyes narrowing. They brought drones to sacred ground. He turned to Holt. End this. Holt lifted her radio. Negative response from command. They're proceeding. Brooks's jaw flexed. Then we do it our way. He reached for his rifle, resting it against his shoulder, every motion precise. Ruiz, still posted at the far end of the plaza, mirrored him instinctively. Their steps synced across stone, the sound like thunder rolling closer. The drone descended, camera glinting. The crowd parted. Brooks stopped beneath it, gaze fixed upward. And in the reflection of the marble, the machine's red light blinked like an unholy eye watching hallowed ground. He lifted his hand slowly. And in that suspended silence, Ruiz understood exactly what his sergeant meant to do. The last thing the cameras caught was Brooks's finger curling, not on the trigger, but into a closed fist. The feed cut to static. The fog rolled in before dawn, thick, silver, alive. By the time Ruiz reached the plaza, the marble had turned to mist. The tomb rose from it like an island of light, the engraved words barely visible. Here rests, in honored glory, an American soldier, known but to God. He stopped at the threshold, breath steaming in the chill. No crowds now, no cameras, just silence. He'd never heard Arlington so still. Brooks stood before the tomb, hat under his arm, coat damp with dew. He'd been there all night. His silhouette looked carved from the same stone he guarded. The rifle leaned against the marble beside him, unloaded. He'd made sure of that after the broadcast chaos. When Ruiz approached, the fog swallowed his footsteps. Permission to enter the plaza, Sergeant. Brooks didn't turn. You're already in it, son. Ruiz stopped a few feet away. They suspended us. I know. Brooks's voice was quiet, like the fog itself spoke. They think silence is defiance. Ruiz's hand brushed his chest pocket. The letter, still there, still folded over his heart. Sir, they're calling it the letter of the unknown. It's everywhere. Brooks nodded once. The world's first viral funeral. Neither smiled. The marble smelled of wet stone and candle wax. Holt had left a lantern burning through the night, its flames small but stubborn. The soft glow reflected on the tomb's face, one light guarding another. Brooks finally turned. You still have it. Ruiz took a breath. Yes, Sergeant. Let me see it. Ruiz drew the envelope from his pocket. The paper felt different now, softer, almost warm. He handed it over carefully, like it might shatter. Brooks turned it in his gloved hand, eyes scanning the faded ink. He wrote it to his son, Brooks said. Yes, Sergeant. And he died before he could send it. Yes, Sergeant. Brooks studied the letter as if it could answer everything he'd never said aloud. They'll want to read it again, louder this time, on camera, with music. Ruiz looked up. Then let's read it ourselves, the right way. Brooks met his eyes, measuring the cost. No broadcast, no crowd. Just him, Ruiz said, nodding to the tomb. And us. A long silence followed. The fog curled around their boots like smoke. Somewhere in the distance, the first flag was being raised. Brooks exhaled. Do it. Ruiz unfolded the paper. The ink shimmered faintly in the lantern light. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. If I don't make it home, tell my boy I stood my watch. The sound seemed to hang in the air, caught in the mist. Brooks closed his eyes. Ruiz continued. Tell him I never ran, even when the world burned. Tell him I believed that some things don't need names to be remembered. If I fall, let someone stand where I stood, so that when he visits, he'll know his father kept the line. The words cracked in Ruiz's throat. The paper trembled. He lowered it slowly, tears hot against the morning cold. Brooks swallowed hard. He wrote this 50 years ago. Yes, Sergeant. And his son. Ruiz's gaze lifted toward the tomb. Could have been one of them, maybe the one right here. Brooks stepped closer, eyes glinting. You think this letter came back to finish its duty? I think it waited for someone to hear it. Brooks looked at the marble inscription, the endless silence behind it. Then we'll finish it. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small American flag, one he kept folded in the inner pocket, edges worn smooth from years of carrying. He placed it gently beside the tomb. Then, without a word, Ruiz set the letter on the marble, right below the engraving. They both stood back. The fog thickened until the letter disappeared, absorbed into the mist as if taken. Do you think he heard it? Ruiz asked. Brooks's reply came after a long pause. They all did. From behind them came soft footsteps. MSG Holt emerged from the veil, her silver bracelet catching the first shaft of sun that broke through the clouds. She stopped when she saw the two men and the tomb between them. They called off the press conference, she said quietly. Mercer's been reassigned. Brooks didn't move. Good. But Command still wants a public reading later this week. Brooks turned to her. There won't be one. Holt frowned. You planning to stop it again? He looked at Ruiz, then back to the tomb. No, we already gave them the only reading that matters. Holt followed his gaze. The letter was gone. The marble bare again, glistening under the breaking sun. She looked back at Ruiz. You took it? Ruiz shook his head. No, ma'am, I swear, but the wind carried nothing now, only the echo of the flag overhead snapping once, then falling silent. Brooks whispered, almost to himself. He finished his watch. The three stood there, no ceremony, no witnesses, as the fog finally began to lift. From somewhere deep in the cemetery, a trumpet sounded reveille. The sound rolled over the hills, through the rows of white stones, over the tomb, and into their chests. Ruiz closed his eyes. His heart matched the rhythm of that call, a heartbeat of memory. When he opened them, Brooks had already turned to face him. We'll take the heat for this, he said. Doesn't matter, Ruiz replied. He deserved to be heard. Brooks nodded. You'll learn something about this place, Ruiz. It doesn't remember faces, it remembers fidelity, and that's enough. The light broke full now, gold spilling across the marble. The tomb gleamed like living fire. Brooks saluted once, sharp, perfect. Ruiz followed, arms steady despite the tremor that wanted to rise. Holt joined them, her bracelet glinting one last time. In that moment, the world was right again, quiet, guarded. But as they lowered their hands, a faint sound rose from the plaza steps, a single soft flutter. A letter. The same one. It rested against the marble once more, dry now, untouched by weather, edges new. Ruiz bent down slowly. His pulse thundered. The handwriting was the same, but there was an extra line at the bottom in fresh ink. To those who kept the watch, thank you. Brooks and Holt stared, breath caught. Ruiz's hands shook as he looked up at the tomb, eyes wide. The air was still. And from nowhere, a breeze swept through the plaza, gentle, warm, and carried the letter beneath the marble edge, out of sight. Brooks whispered. He signed out. Ruiz stood frozen, the sunrise washing over them all. The sky over Arlington burned gold at noon. A crowd had gathered again, thousands now, lining the rope pressed shoulder to shoulder. Phones lifted, cameras readied, reporters whispered. The world had returned to witness what it didn't understand. SSG Elijah Brooks stood on the plaza in full dress, gloves spotless, eyes steady. This time, there were no drones, no interviews, no sound checks, just the tomb, gleaming under a merciless sun and silence thick enough to feel. Beside him, SPC Daniel Ruiz waited at attention, the rifle gleaming across his chest. Holt stood a few paces back, silver bracelet catching the light. The air smelled of heat and metal, the kind of stillness that only breaks once. Command had ordered a ceremony, a public resolution, a reading of the letter of the unknown for the cameras. Brooks had agreed, on paper, but no one knew what he intended. The master of ceremonies, a colonel with a parade voice, stepped up to the podium. He adjusted his notes, cleared his throat, and began the speech the Pentagon had written overnight. Yesterday, the tomb guards discovered a letter believed to have been written by a soldier in Vietnam. His words remind us of... Brooks took one step forward. The colonel faltered. The camera zoomed. "Permission to speak, sir," Brooks said. The colonel frowned. "Sergeant, this isn't—" "Granted or not," Brooks said, "I'm speaking." A murmur rolled through the crowd. The colonel stepped back. Brooks faced the tomb. The reflection of his uniform shimmered in the marble, a living echo beside the words, "Known but to God." His voice carried low but clear, every syllable sharpened by conviction. "There are some messages that are not meant to be read aloud, some letters that don't belong to the living." A hush spread across the plaza. Even the birds fell quiet. "I've stood this line for 12 years, Brooks continued. "I've watched storms tear flags, watched tourists laugh, watched soldiers cry. Every one of them came here looking for something, but this ground doesn't answer questions. It keeps them." He turned his head slightly toward the cameras. "That letter wasn't a relic. It wasn't a headline. It was a father speaking to a son, and we listened. That's enough." Holt stepped forward, eyes wet, voice steady. "Sergeant, you'll be reprimanded." "Then they can write my name next to his," Brooks said. "We'll share the silence." The crowd stirred, reporters whispering, phones rising, but none dared interrupt. The moment belonged to the marble. Brooks reached into his jacket and drew the letter. It was whole again, dry, the paper impossibly clean, the same one they'd seen vanish in the fog. Ruiz's eyes widened. He hadn't seen it since that dawn. Brooks looked down at it, reading it one final time under his breath. Then he turned to Ruiz. "Private," he said softly. "You found it. You finish it." Ruiz's throat tightened. "Sir." "That's an order." The young guard stepped forward, boots ringing against marble. He took the letter in trembling hands. For a long breath, he just stood there, a living shadow beside the tomb. Then he spoke. "If I don't make it home, tell my boy I stood my watch. And if my watch ends, let another stand where I stood. To those who keep faith with the fallen, thank you." His voice broke on the last word. A single tear hit the marble, darkening the white. Brooks stepped beside him, placed a gloved hand on Ruiz's shoulder, and faced the cameras. "Now," Brooks said, "you've heard it. You don't need to see it again." He folded the letter once, twice, perfectly square. Then, without ceremony, he knelt and slid it beneath the tomb's edge, where no hand would ever retrieve it. When he rose, the crowd was silent. Not a cough, not a shutter click. Even the wind seemed to bow its head. Brooks saluted, sharp, perfect, final. Ruiz mirrored him. Holt followed, the silver bracelet catching the sun one last time. For 10 full seconds, the entire world stood still. Then the colonel's mic crackled, feedback slicing the air. Brooks turned, unclipped it from the podium, and dropped it gently to the stone. The echo carried, one clean clack, like a rifle chamber closing. He faced the crowd. Ceremony concluded. And with that he turned and began the walk, 21 steps down the plaza, each one slower, heavier, more deliberate than the last. Ruiz fell into step beside him, 2 guards, one line carrying the weight of all who couldn't. The flag above them snapped once in the summer wind, then went still. The crowd didn't applaud. They couldn't. Brooks reached the end of his path, pivoted, rifle up. The white marble shimmered. In the reflection, he saw the tomb, and beside it, for a fleeting instant, the silhouette of a man in a faded Vietnam uniform, hand raised in salute. Ruiz saw it too. Neither spoke. Then the figure was gone. The reflection showed only the living once more. The air was heavy with reverence. The world was watching. Brooks looked to the camera nearest him and said quietly, "Remember them, not me." He resumed his march. The sound of boots striking marble rolled like thunder through the silence of Arlington. One final voice, unseen, unheard, seemed to ride the wind. Watch kept. Duty done. The camera feed faded to white. Subscribe to honor the silent, those who gave everything and asked for nothing.